initiative. This is principally about reoccurring flooding, sea level rise, but it's also about various other adaptations that we are undertaking. Before I jump in, I just want to give a shout out to all of our partners. These are all organizations that we've reached out to in the last 6 or so years that we've been working on this. We have a lot of smart individuals and institutions in this region who have really helped us out. So I just want to give them due credit for being a part of what you're going to see in the slides coming up. So just a little bit of context. We started down this journey to get to where we are today back in early 2015 with the kickoff of the Dutch Dialogues in Hampton Roads. Obviously, in that effort, many of you may know about, we brought, in collaboration, we worked with the City of Norfolk, the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, and other partners in the region to initiate a conversation in the region about sea level rise and how this may affect our communities. The cities of Norfolk and Hampton were the two sort of test cases, I guess, during the Dutch dialogues, and that really sort of began to crystallize for us what we wanted to try to do in terms of our efforts. You'll see a couple other dates on here. I'll mention these throughout the presentation, and I'll wrap up with a conversation about our recent environmental impact bond, which is the first of its kind in the Commonwealth. So most of you probably are aware of these sort of forces that are affecting us here in the region. Hampton Roads is one of the most vulnerable regions in the country. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I can certainly come back to this, but we are using the sea level rise projections from the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission that you can see over on the right. That's kind of our planning horizon as we go through our efforts. On the right, you'll see the yellow and red map. The circled areas are all the red circled or identified areas are all the reoccurring flood properties in the city. So we're using that as kind of a data point. What you'll see on the left in that gray image of the city of Hampton is the dark gray is kind of the general extent of the 100-year floodplain right now. The lighter gray is a projection across the city if there's 4.5 feet of sea level rise using the Planning District Commission. So you can see literally about 60% of our community will be affected in one way, shape, or form if those projections come to pass. We began the process, as most communities do, with a very extensive outreach process. So we went out into these various areas of the community, asked them about historical anecdotal data about impacts to their lives, their properties, recorded all these maps, which have all these sort of incident dots on them, collected some really amazing old photographs of storm events that some of the residents in Hampton had. So it was really kind of a useful process. What we came out of that process with some sort of aha moments. So these are kind of examples of what we sort of set our course for and said, you know, we're going to embrace this challenge. Keep in mind that back in the 2015 timeframe, there was a big debate going on around the country about whether or not sea level rise was actually a real thing. So, you know, to say that we kind of, you know, we embraced the data, we said this is really an issue that we have to confront, seems like an easy thing to do in today's world, but back then it had some political implications to it. So we then moved on to sort of the next layer of conversation. And again, I'm not going to run through all of these. The important part of this is the community really sort of led us to create a very community value-based approach to how we were going to try to solve some of these challenges. The box off to the left that starts with safe and ends with innovative, those were community values that members of our community said they wanted us to apply to coming up with solutions to these particular problems. So for example, they preferred natural solutions to hardened built solutions, although they understood we might not be able to do all of one or the other. Hampton's a very old historic community. They didn't want us to come up with solutions that were going to, for example, wipe out historic properties or historic areas or districts. So they wanted us to come up with solutions that respected our heritage. So that's kind of how we've been applying this as we go forward. And then over on the right-hand side is kind of our internal guiding principles as we go forward. You'll see embracing those values and reinforcing our assets, so not take a sort of a detrimental approach to the solutions or the challenges. Using good data, share knowledge, and build partnerships are all been important to our efforts so far. So we got to that point, and our city council identified the Newmarket Creek Basin, which was also the topic of the Dutch dialogues, as our sort of first geographic footprint that they wanted us to test these principles. So you can, just on the graphic to the left, you can see Newmarket Creek connects out to Back River and into the bay, and it runs really right down through the middle of our community. So it affects a lot of different neighborhoods, some commercial districts, very diverse socioeconomic neighborhoods. So we thought it was complicated, but a really good test case to move forward. The system itself, and I won't dive into too much of this because it gets fairly complicated, and at some point I'm over my skis and in my technical knowledge of hydrology, but what we analyzed was this system really falls into three distinct segments. The upper segment of the Newmarket Creek Basin is largely driven by rain events, rainfall hitting the ground, going into the drainage system. The middle section is kind of really interesting because it's affected either by rain events or tidal events, or in the worst of cases, both at the same time. And then on the far right, you see the areas that are largely coastally impacted through tides. So we have this system that has different characteristics, and we surmise that probably our solutions out here have got to be different for each of these regions. So just a quick kind of visual of what we're confronting with. So this is a 1937 view of a part of the Newmarket Creek Basin. You'll see it's mostly farmland, open land. So when we had flood and storm events, there was a natural kind of flow, out of the banks across the fields, very little property damage. So the creek itself had room to go. Obviously, that's not the case, in more recent times. You've constricted the natural sort of drainage patterns and watershed to being a very narrow kind of system here, which is partly causing, or a large part of the problem that we're confronting. So how do we do a better job with this system in and of itself? Again, going through this pretty quickly, another community meeting. The meeting you see on the right in 2019, we had over 200 people show up, which was good news and bad news. The good news was great to have that many people out. The bad news was we didn't have enough chairs. So it was kind of uncomfortable people, but it was good. It was a good, fruitful, robust conversation. Out of all of that, we started digging into the analysis. And again, this is really a heavily data-driven slide that I won't dig into too much, but you'll see on the graph to the right that we color-coded all the land uses and identified the percentage of impervious surface and runoff that was coming off of each of those land uses. And you can see the predominant ones are runoff coming from right-of-way, streets, roads, single-family residential, which, as you can see on the land use map to the left, is the predominant land use, and then on down the scale. So this started to inform us as to the kind of solutions we should be looking for if this is where most of the challenges and issues were sort of originating. We ultimately ended up with this sort of simple, cartoonish kind of graphic that really kind of helps explain the basics of our approach to these challenges. So we're going to figure out strategies to slow water down. How do we store it better? In some cases, we may have to redirect it to minimize damage, and then adaptation of how we build, develop, and live our lives. So all of those buckets of solutions are in play for us as we put together our strategies. So now I'm going to fast forward to where we are today. The next couple of projects you're going to see, these are projects that are now funded and we are in design. We're approaching the 50% design phase for two of these projects. The other one I'll explain while that's a little further behind. So what we really did with this approach and these pilot projects, which are an attempt to sort of prove our concept is we've taken replicable elements of our landscape, and we've said, how can we make this better? How can we solve these problems? So what you're seeing here is our proposed project, which basically takes a typical drainage ditch and turns it into not only a water storage, so a water capacity enhancement, but it's also through green infrastructure. It helps water quality impacts. And we have these added benefits that what we really learned from the Dutch in our experience with them is this ditch system, as you see it graphically illustrated, will also be a linear greenway that people in the adjacent neighborhoods can access, along the entire length of this project. So as I said, this project is about 50% design. We hope to be about 100% design by the end of the summer, and then proceed to bidding and construction. So that's one of the pilot projects, focusing on how do we retrofit the typical ditch, drainage ditch in our community. And if you can imagine, if this works, which we think it will, then multiply that by 50 or 100 times, because there are that many drainage ditches, across our community and other communities. So one of the other projects in our pilot suite of projects is to look at another typical element of our landscape, which is our road. So how do you take a typical road and turn it into a green road with green infrastructure, or a resilient road with green infrastructure? So this is a section of Armstead Avenue. For Ryan that lives in the community and others, this is right near where Home Depot is. If you drive that area, it floods quite frequently in nor'easters. So we're going to elevate the road, which is kind of a relatively, in the scheme of things, simple engineering kind of solution. But as we do that, we're also going to create, as you can see in the medians and along the shoulders of the road, we're going to create these retention areas, green bioswales to store water, clean water. And the added benefit of, we'll also develop, again, the theme of this being multiple public benefits from a project like this. We're going to connect this, build a multi-purpose trail which will connect and be a part of the Birthplace of America Trail. And the last of the three is the Lake Hampton retrofit. This main divided road that you see running through here is Armstead Avenue. So this is an old borrow pit that we are going to convert into a stormwater facility that will treat both quantity and quality. We are going to construct a drainage train that will take water off of Armstead Avenue and run it through the system into the lake, which will slow it down, store a bit of it, but most importantly, clean that water into the lake before it empties out into Newmarket Creek. We're also going to be accepting some runoff from the adjoining neighborhoods into this system. The green area you see will be incorporated into our Newmarket trail system, which is the first phase of that is already complete. So there will be, again, water access to the lake via kayak or hiking trails around Lake Hampton as well. So the last thing I'll touch on is I want to talk a little bit about how we finance these projects. I mentioned in my introduction, we're financing them through an environmental impact bond. This is the first environmental impact bond issued in the state of Virginia. It's only the third environmental impact bond issued in the United States, although there are several others kind of in the hopper ready to go. And so it's a fairly new, innovative way to finance these projects. An environmental impact bond is a general obligation bond, but it has some special characteristics, the most important of which is you are either in a voluntary or mandatory reporting of the results of your project. So basically what we did is go out to the market and say, if people are interested in buying these bonds, one of the benefits, there's going to be environmental benefits, social health benefits, and oh, by the way, we're also going to prove to you that what we're building is going to achieve our goals. So we actually have to report out at the end of the project how we performed. Just another slide here. Again, I won't go through all of this. I'll be happy to answer any questions about the environmental impact bond, but I do want to Again, give another shout out to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. They were huge partners with us and helped us fund some of the initial analysis and helped us figure out how to apply for an environmental impact bond. Quantified Ventures was one of the firms that was hired through Chesapeake Bay Foundation to help us out. Without them, we couldn't have done this. But I do want to call your attention to the quote down at the bottom from Zach Solomon, who worked with us from Morgan Stanley. Basically, that quote says that our environmental impact bond structure, he considers now kind of the gold standard based on the response we got from the market. And just to sort of put a fine point on that, our borrowing rate for this bond was 1.88%, several notches lower than what we think we would have gotten if it had been just a standard general obligation bond. And you might ask, well, why did that happen? I think for two reasons. One is we're tapping into a source of financing that is sort of new and different. There are people out there who want to purchase these green bonds or environmental impact bonds, and they're not solely motivated by making a return on their investment. They're also motivated by social and environmental benefits. And so if projects can demonstrate they will have those benefits, then at least in our experience, you're in a good position to get a really attractive borrowing rate that then allows you to leverage more money for the same amount, and it allows you then to leverage that money and finance more projects. So that's kind of the thinking for us behind going the environmental impact bond route. Last thoughts, we're early in the game. We've issued the bonds. We're now going through the process of designing and structuring the projects. A couple of sort of takeaways. Clearly, environmental impact bonds are new, so we had to go through a pretty steep learning curve. For finance professionals, for example, this is a new way of borrowing. They've never seen it before. So, you have to kind of overcome that. I've talked a little bit about mandatory disclosure versus voluntary disclosure. Our bond, our environmental impact bond, is a voluntary disclosure. We volunteered to disclose the outcomes of our projects. We think that was a good thing. It's very transparent to not only the public, but to the borrowers. So we think that helped us get that really low borrow rate. We did use well-known standards as benchmarks in our EIB offering, using the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals and the ICMA Green Bond Principles. We use these because we think it gave the market, green investors, confidence that what we were offering them was based on these sort of recognized standards. So we think that was a good thing to do. And lastly, you must be willing to accept a little bit of a higher degree of public accountability. As I said, we have to publicly publish the outcome of our projects. That was part of the agreement in the EIB offering. So with that, I'll kind of wrap things up. Hopefully I gave you a little bit of insight of what we're doing and kind of how we're doing it, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. So Ryan, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, all right, great. Yeah, I appreciate that. Definitely learned a lot, and y'all's familiar with all those areas that you pointed out. So, good information. And we'll move on next to our next presenter. Not too sure if all you are familiar with Gary Harris, but he's the founder and current principal at the Center for Sustainable Communities. Take a long time to talk about, what Gary's done throughout his career. So, I'm gonna let him get into his presentation, just so he can focus on, one aspect of what he's done. And, just to add, in terms of his work in Portsmouth, for us, just talking with our team, it's one city that we've really looked at, just in terms of ways that we can contribute and just, make an impact and make a difference. Just learn a little bit more about just different programs within that city. So, I'm going to turn it over to Gary and, share my screen, and he can go through his presentation. Gary, when you need me to flip to a new slide, just let me know. I'll be in the background. All
Okay.
Right. Wait 1 second, Gary.
Okay. You ready?
Yes, wait one second. I need to get to your portion. Yeah, it's kind of like the upper screen is getting in my way right now. So, but I got you. Yes, wait 1 second. Go to present. All right, go.
Okay, all right. My slides are not as nearly as pretty as Terry's, but hopefully the content will be just as interesting. Hi, afternoon, Gary Harris. I'm Managing Director, Center for Sustainable Communities. We're well about making communities greener, cleaner, healthier, safer, and more climate resilient. And we do that through an equity and an environmental justice lens. And today we're going to focus on our Eco District Hampton Roads project. It's all about our communities, and how do we make them greener, healthier? How do we achieve district scale sustainability? How do we move communities from being thriving, from striving to thriving? Well, one way to do that is by using the Eco District Protocol. That's what we've done in enforcement, is to use this Eco District Protocol, again, to help define the community needs and define a roadmap for the community, and then move it in the direction of district scale sustainability. Next slide, please. So we know that around the world, cities are going through a huge transformation, and more than 1/2 of the population is going to live in cities. Okay, so to support urbanization, trillions of dollars are being funneled into communities. So we want to make sure that our communities are ready for this transformation. We want to make sure that our communities are robust as possible. That they define imperatives and priorities, that they're working collectively towards common goals. To move them towards a more resilient and sustainable future. And we think that we have to define a methodology to do that. Next slide, please. Okay. So cities contribute to a growing equity gap, and but most time these days, if you look at a postal zip code, that can tell everything about you, what your wealth status is, your health status, what your life expectancy is, etc. So we're trying to level out the playing field here. We're trying to ensure that communities have a fighting chance, that communities know what their priorities are and act on their priorities, that we decrease this equity gap, that we decrease the disparity gap. And how do we do that? One way of doing that is through the Eco District Protocol. Next slide, please. Okay, so our Eco District Hampton Roads project is centered in Portsmouth around a community called Cavalier Manor and such, and there are 7 other neighborhoods which surround this hub community. This hub community, and collectively we call that Eco District Hampton Roads. There's a boundary which defines this eco district, which helps us to later on to come back, and map out and define strategies and indicators to move the community forward. And all communities have a vision, but through the eco district, we use collective impact and collaborative problem solving and other strategic measures, to move the community forward to meet the needs of those residents. Next slide, please. Again, so this is an aerial shot of the community here. Again, the Cavalier Manor community. Then there's 7 other neighborhoods around that hub community, which again form this eco district, as we call it. Next slide, please. So back in the day, we had a resident called Nathan McCall, and Nathan had a great storied history. He was a gangbanger in our community. He wreaked havoc, and he told about how our community lacked in certain measures and didn't have the resources that it needed, and didn't have the cohesiveness that it needed, and we need to focus on community building. So back in the day, he wrote a book called "Just Make You Want to Holla." They just want you to throw up your hands in disgust, in despair. about our communities, because they were not the way that they should be, not the way that we envisioned and such. So, but then how can we take Nathan's cry and transform it into something that's alive, that's vivid, and that meets his dreams and expectations? Make you want to holler. Next slide, please. So we decided to adopt a measure called the Eco District Protocol. And it's a procedure, basically, or guidance document that provides a prescriptive way to move communities forward, to advance them around imperatives of equity, resilience, and climate action, to advance them around priorities of health and wellness, of prosperity for all, to put together a roadmap, to bring together collaboratives of people at the grassroots level, again to come up with a roadmap to drive the community forward. So this Eco District Protocol has been used all over the country. So it's a procedure, but you can change it, you can morph it, you can modify it to move your community forward in a sustainable manner. And that's what we did. Next slide, please. But it's all about creating a vision. And all residents in all communities will want to live in a community that's healthy, that's vibrant, that's a fun place to live, that has strong culture, strong bases in art, and a vision of being sustainable across every street, across every green field and such. And that's what the Eco District Protocol strives to do, to achieve that district scale sustainability, again, making the most resilient community possible, and again, tackling our issues such that we achieve this goal of district scale sustainability. What does that look like? Next slide, please. So basically, we focus on three imperatives: equity, resilience, and climate action. And these are cross-cutting imperatives. So every project, every activity, every event, okay, embeds these imperatives and such. And in that manner, we help to ensure that we have a foundation for everything that we do, and everything that we do helps to advance equity and resilience and climate action. And I'll show you some of the projects in a second here. Next slide, please. Besides that, so we have three imperatives. We have 6 priorities, and we focus on creating a sense of place, i.e., a place with high volunteerism, strong culture, great use of the arts and such, great charity. Next, health and wellness. Everybody's out walking, biking, or we're having farmers markets, like growing our own food, etc. Economic prosperity for all. We're pushing forward with good jobs, decent work, sustainable wages, and such. Living infrastructure. Our creeks and ponds and trees are our treasures, and we try to preserve that. Resource restoration. We try and eliminate air, water, land pollution whenever we can. And connectivity. Not only are our streets working to be connected, but ensuring that everybody is connected over the internet and communicating, et cetera, et cetera. So again, 3 imperatives, 6 priorities. Next slide, please. Okay, so some of the key projects that we have worked on include energy for all. We know that in Virginia, a lot of our low-income marginalized communities have high energy burdens, i.e., if we look at the total cost of energy compared to their income, it's greater than 6% or 7% or 8%. That's huge compared to the nation. So we have a project, Energy for All, which tries to, 1, educate, 2, change behaviors, and 3, we go in and do audits to provide a more firmer rollback of those energy costs. Next, green spaces, the green food. Our underserved communities, are targeted by Dollar General, are targeted by Family Dollar, are targeted by 7-Eleven, which are great for convenience, but bad for health. So we want to make sure that we're growing our own food, that we're creating community gardens, that we're having farmers markets, that we're exchanging fresh vegetables, that we have that access. So we're taking 8 green spaces within our community and transforming those into community gardens, and composting areas, and areas for exercise, et cetera, et cetera. Green spaces to good food, great food, healthy homes. When we spend the vast majority of ourselves in buildings, whether it be at work, in a commercial building, or at home, nowadays at home. So we're breathing in, the mold, we're breathing in the mildew, and the contaminants, etc. So particularly in our older homes, and this community was built, some of the homes were built in the late 50s and early 60s and such. So therefore, they may have these hidden health issues associated with them, mold and mildew, etc. there. So we have an audit or an app, if you would, to go inside of these homes, take measurements, assess them, and drive them to more healthier state. Housing justice. These homes are just ripe for takeover. They're ripe for gentrification. So we're pushing back on that, because we want to ensure that our communities are whole, our communities are strong and fit, and therefore housing is at the center, and home ownership is at the center. So housing justice, we make sure that we're pushing back a bit on gentrification, pushing back a bit on development induced displacement, and embracing home ownership and legacy wealth building, etc. Housing justice. It's all about walking the streets and making observations. And so we've developed a street level observation app where we can walk around and look at 33 different attributes, and then record those and trend those, monitor those things, whether it be trash on the street or broken down automobiles, et cetera, et cetera. So we have the capability to do that. Because of climate change, we're going to be seeing more extreme weather events, like Terry talked about, just sea level rise and other extreme weather events as well. So we've got to be prepared. So we're building a resilience hub, and that way, when we have these extreme weather events like occurred in Texas, if they had a resilience hub, they would have had at least 72 hours of food, 72 hours of water, 72 hours of shelter, 72 hours of communication building because of the power source, the batteries, backup batteries, etc. So we're building a resilience hub. Got to stay healthy, walking trails, sustainable jobs. It's all about decent work. So we're signing a community benefits agreement with a local industrial park with 130 companies to provide sustainable wage jobs. We're also creating jobs in the offshore wind industry as well. And technology. We have developed some 7 to 8 different apps, websites, etc. for folks. One of the apps that I'm proud of is called Word Up, because we're trying to make sure everybody's in the community is communicating, so we're breaking down these barriers. So we have an app, so if you're looking for the party, if you're looking for, to trade an automobile, if you're looking to find out the single people in the community, we have a Word Up app, so we can have neighbor to neighbor communication. Next slide, please. Okay, this gives you an example of the eco district protocol, what it looks like. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but again, it shows you the objective categories, some of the objectives, and some of the parameters that we look at when we're mapping this out in the community. Next slide, please. Okay, so the eco district protocol is broken into 3 phases. First phase is the formation phase. Here's some of the activities that we do. We want to look at our assets in the community, so we do an asset map. We define community boundary. We want to be ready to do all this stuff, so we do a readiness assessment, EJ analysis using EJ screen, to see what's happening in the community. Charrette and visiting sessions, walkers, audits. We walk the community almost every day, looking for stuff. This is, again, so we can fix it as part of our street level observation. 360 assessments, district team, declaration of collaboration. This means that we're bringing in stakeholders and they're agreeing that we're going to come together in a collaborative sense to transform the community, okay? the district team formation. Next slide, please. Okay, the next one is a roadmap. Okay, so we got these 3 imperatives, 6 priorities. Okay, so we begin to bring it all together, with asset maps and EJ analysis and district team formation and that sort of thing. So now we're ready to generate the roadmap, okay, or how we're going to move this community from being striving to thriving. So we establish context. We do a baseline performance set of indicators. We set targets, set strategies, and then we assemble this roadmap, which basically says, okay, we're going to do green spaces in year 2, and we're going to do this in this green space, et cetera, et cetera. In year 3, we're going to handle flooding, and we're going to do this, in year 4, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, it's a roadmap, again, which starts with our imperatives, priorities, collective impact, collaborative problem solving, declaration of collaboration, stakeholders come together with objectives, indicators, targets, et cetera. There, rolling out this roadmap for change. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, so here's some of the other stuff that we do in this formation phase. We collective impact. We talked about that. Climate problem solving, key stakeholders coming together. Again, creating district scale sustainability. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're trying to create a movement for change. So one way of doing that is to get folks to embrace this effort. So we have a campaign called I'm in the district. So we have maybe hundreds of people or so who've embraced our sign, and taking photographs like this to say I'm in for resilience. I'm in for equity. I'm in for climate action. I'm in for health and wellness. I'm in the district. Next slide, please. I'm gonna go faster here. What have we done? Some 42 projects. Now, when I say projects, these are events, activities, programs, projects, consulting activities, etc. Some 42 though, over a 2-year period. And we've had about 160 individual contributors, students, faculty, consultants, part-time, full-time folks. And as a result of that, we've contributed about 2.8 billion in benefits directly to the community. Okay, so you look at the hours, look at the projects, values, look at the number of individuals, multiply all that together, it comes up to about 2.8 billion. Okay, that's a lot. That's a lot for grassroots efforts. So we're kind of proud of that. Next up, please. I'll go quickly here. It's about storytelling. A lot of our residents are older, and you can see quickly here in his hand is a comic book we've created, which makes our residents, our senior residents, the hero. So we want their stories, as part of their heroic efforts here. Next slide, please. Okay, again, it's about housing justice. We talked about that earlier, making sure that, again, gentrification, development about displacement is not occurring. Again, housing justice team, there's a lot in that area. Just quickly here, the average lifetime of a developer sign in our community is in hours. Somebody puts up a sign that says we buy a house, it comes out via our campaign in 4 hours or less. Anyway, just a side note there. Next slide, please. Okay, again, it's about climate action as well, building a weather-ready nation for all. Next slide, please. Okay, and we're doing a lot, again, in terms of reducing energy burdens here, getting out. We have a street team for energy efficiency where we educate the community about changing their behaviors and using energy, et cetera, again, to minimize energy burdens, minimize energy costs as well. Next slide, please. Okay, and we embrace the UN Sustainability Development Goals, just like Terry. No practice fact. I helped to create the regional center for education and expertise for the state for sustainable development. That's the UN affiliated facility in Atlanta, Georgia, which helps to advance the sustainable development goals. And we roll those into our roadmap as well. Next slide, please. It should be the last slide. Okay, that's me. You can contact me. This is fun stuff. We're having We're having a great time doing this. Matter of fact, I'm at Georgia Tech this week, and we're rolling out 5 more projects from students and faculty to work with us as part of our roadmap as well. So call me up if you have any questions about this. Thank you.
All right, Gary, that was great. That was great. And I think we're always learning something new from Gary. So we certainly appreciate it. And I hope you all got something out of that. I certainly did. Last but not least, we have our Hampton Roads organizer, Colin Arnold. They're going to talk to you about Norfolk and just the efforts, made within that city. Colin, I'm going to let you take it away.
Yeah, hi. I am, of course, not the expert that Gary or Terry are, but I will try my best to talk about what I think is a really exciting development that we've had recently in Norfolk. Ryan, if you could share the slides, otherwise I can get them up real quick. All right, and if we go to that first one.
Yeah, Colin, if you can share it right quick.
Yes, I can. Yeah. All right.
Okay. Yeah, I think I have too many windows up.
That is what the life is like. All right. And so, just to give a quick history of how things have gone in Norfolk, started in 2013 when Norfolk joined the 100 Resilient Cities Initiative, which was a global network of coastal cities to try and get a lot of information and put together models for sharing information, support, and the creation of local resiliency plans. As you know, Terry went into, Norfolk was also a participant in the Dutch dialogues, along with most of the rest of Hampton Roads. Their coastal resilience strategy was implemented by the city using goals-based structure, focusing on 3 big goals: designing and innovating the future of coastal communities. Creating solutions that can be replicated other places is really, really important to the Norfolk plan, as well as creating economic incentives for businesses to create resilient industries within the city so that this can all be a sustainable, recurring thing, and making sure that above all else that efforts strengthening existing communities in Norfolk. And the thing I want to highlight is a project that is really concerned with that third note, and that is the Chesterfield Heights and Grandy Village communities in Norfolk. If you're not familiar with them, they're 2 side-by-side neighborhoods that are kind of jammed between I-264 and the Elizabeth River, old historically Black communities. A really kind of iconic in kind of the local flavor that Norfolk has. And part of the problem is the construction of 264 left them with only 2 streets that go in and out of those neighborhoods, and one of them floods really badly. And if sea level rise continues, especially up to the 1.5-foot rise that Norfolk is expecting to deal with by 2050, that will probably completely isolate these 2 neighborhoods in the event of rain or tidal flooding. Which is not good. It basically cuts out two whole communities of Norfolk from any kind of support for healthcare, food, even just trying to evacuate in the event of really climactic flooding. Part of the with the help of a $112 million federal grant that Norfolk applied for. This is a part of Obama era, climate grants that were going out. They have the city is trying to fix the problem and create a solution so that these 2 neighborhoods don't have to deal with all of this flooding. And the solutions go from simple things like raising both of those roads to make sure that flooding will no longer completely eclipse them. to creating a new tidal flooding and stormwater mitigation system via a new park for the neighborhoods, as well as tidal gates to help hold back some of the tidal flooding, and additional wetland restoration to help create a buffer zone that will help deal with some of this flooding as it comes into the city. This entire project has been called the Ohio Creek Watershed Project. It took nearly 2 years to be planned out, and it is currently breaking ground as of March this year. It will take a while. It's not going to be completed until 2020, but it does show that these efforts can be seen on the ground right now. I can't wait to see how the efforts in Hampton continue to also help communities that have existed in these cities for decades. And I think it really goes to show how well these sustainability efforts and projects can help our cities stay the way that we see them now. The funding I want to point out here is really important, though. We were able to help Chesterfield and Grandy Village because of a federal grant, and the Office of Resiliency in Norfolk is estimating a bill of around over $1 billion of infrastructure projects across Norfolk to address similar issues. And a lot of this is going to come from public sources like federal grants or state initiatives like RGGI, which is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which does collect fees from manufacturers and electrical utilities, power plants, that kind of thing. And that money can be put back into the communities for things like green infrastructure projects. That 100 Cities Resilient Initiative also opens up avenues for funding and consultancies to help manage city funds to do this. As Terry talked about, we now have this wonderful green bond program that will hopefully fund a lot more projects like these. And then there's also things like Norfolk partnered with the Army Corps of Engineers to help basically completely engineer and design, water resiliency in the Ocean View area. And because we partnered with them, the Army Corps of Engineers are actually paying over half of that project to get done. And should help have a huge, impact on storm surges and tidal flooding. And I specifically want to bring up, funding because we are entering with the Biden Build Back Better plan. We have to lean in to our representatives at the state and federal level to make sure that they are accounting for the impact that greater funding can have on our cities, because we have experts working in various resiliency offices in cities across Virginia, but not every city is going to have $1 billion that they can use to fund all of these projects, and we have to make that funding available somehow. And so I encourage you to give a call to your state and federal representatives to let them know that funding needs to be made available to cities across the country, so that stormwater drainage can be built, so tidal locks can be put together, so we can have things like the greenways they're building in Hampton. And yeah, short and sweet. You can also check out some other stuff. We've got plenty of other events for Earth Day coming up, and you can check most of those out on our Mobilize page. We've got a lot of petitions on there for MVP and SR1, and you can also get in contact with us to help volunteer. We are always looking for people to help phone bank. We don't have anything going on right now, but with the American Jobs Act, we should have a lot going on as far as getting in contact with people and calling your representatives. I also I've been doing a podcast interviewing people about once a month, which we had Gary Harris on. I highly suggest going to listen to it. You can find it by searching Commonwealth Climate Talks on Spotify or on iTunes, and especially check out the video that we had, or not the video, the podcast that we had with Gary, if you're at all interested in really diving into some of the other programs that he was talking about today. Yeah. Oh. And do we have, it is just about 7. Do we want to take time for questions?
Yeah, I mean, if anybody has any questions, feel free and go ahead.
We do have one in, and it's for Terry. Josh Mitri asks, what would an investor in environmental impact bonds see as far as interest? Is it private investors, and how do you get their money back when the project is not profit based?
So what we are finding in this sort of new world of investors is that there is a group of investors out there who are willing to invest their money. Many times these are foundations or trusts that are, part of their mission in life is to use their funds for positive social and environmental change. And so, they purchase these kinds of bonds with the idea that they're going to get some nominal return on their money. But profit is not their only motivating factor. They're looking to create positive change, and if they can help invest in projects or innovative projects that achieve these kinds of social and environmental goals, then they're willing to do that. So they're getting their money back. They're getting a nominal return on their investment, but they're not necessarily motivated to get the maximum financial return for their investment in these projects. So I hope that it answered the question.
Josh has a follow-up question of asking how do they get their money back? And I believe that's if you want to go into the basics of bonds, feel free. But I believe it's just when you purchase the bond, it's basically held in trust. Eventually, the organization has to pay that money back, and then after a predetermined span of, say 50 years or 25 years, the bond is then paid back with interest to the purchaser, correct?
Correct. Yeah, these are typically, at least my understanding, obviously there's only been 3 of them in the country, but typically these are somewhere on the neighborhood of 10 to 15 or 20-year bond repayments.
Well, thank you so much. That's very informative. All right. Well, unless we have any more questions, we are running at 7:05. So I will turn it over to Ryan again.
So that's it. Just want to thank everybody for tuning in. Colin, thank you for all the hard work. And Terry, thank you so much for participating, especially on short notice. I know how things are going at the city. So thanks a lot. I definitely learned a lot. I always like to talk about Hampton, because I've been here for a little bit over 4.5 years. It's not my native city, but I really enjoyed my time here. So it's always good to hear somebody, talk about the city and, all the good things that are going on. And, Gary, once again, thank you for helping out, because, if you haven't tuned in to, all of our events, I don't think anybody's tuned in to all of our events, but, Gary's been involved in, I think, about 4 events, within the past year. And, he's also been instrumental in helping our interns, in particular last summer, do a pretty large scale event. So, we always appreciate Gary and the work that he does, and just, being there when we need him. And, I think we're done with the questions. And, like Colin said, we have some other events coming up. This is just kind of like the beginning of our Earth Day celebration. So definitely tune in, click on the links, take action. If you want to volunteer with us, get in contact. And also, lastly, definitely, check out the podcast. It's really good content. And you can learn a whole lot from the guests. So, we'll conclude the event for today, and have a good rest of your evening. All right.
Take care, everybody.
All right. See you.